Take the challenge out of soap making with this simple recipe and easy instructions on how to create beautiful layers for your soap. The first step in making soap is preparing your workspace and gathering all your necessary materials. So here I have my gloves, I have my strainer, my spatula, my thermometer. I have a little silicone placemat that I use to store all of my items. And then of course I have a stick blender. Next, let's prepare the lye solution. So I'm using Bella Chemical sodium hydroxide, which I got from Walmart. You can order it if they don't have it in the store. And then I also used distilled water, which is best for soap because it provides a consistent starting point. When you use tap water or other type of waters, you run into the risk of having minerals or calcium or other things in the water that could react with your soap. The next step is to measure out your lye, and you want to make sure you are using a heat resistant container. So one of those containers that have the triangle with the 5 in it is a good indicator that it's an okay tool to use for your soap. It's also important to make sure you use a scale to measure out all of your ingredients, but definitely your lye and your distilled water, because too much lye can give you a crumbly texture and can make the soap very unsafe for your skin. And too little lye can make it very soft or sticky with an oily residue, and the soap will definitely go rancid. So it's important to make sure that you have adequately measured out your ingredients. It's also important to add your lye to your water and not the other way around. If water is added to the lye, the concentrated lye at the bottom can quickly generate an intense heat, causing the mixture to bubble, splash, and even erupt. So if you want to be safe and keep your skin intact, then definitely always add the lye to the water. And make sure you mix it in a well-ventilated area. I prefer to do this outside or in the garage with the garage door open, because I want an easy breeze going through there to keep those fumes from going into my lungs and causing me to cough and choke. Next, let's measure out our oil. So we're using olive oil, coconut oil, and castor oil. So we're going to measure this out on a scale to make sure it is adequately measured out. Making sure that you measured everything out is very important for two main reasons. One, for saponification. Saponification is the chemical reaction that occurs when fats or oils come into contact with a strong alkali, which in this case would be sodium hydroxide, and it makes a bar of soap. Measuring out your oils in your lye solution correctly will ensure proper saponification and also give you whatever your achieved desired soap qualities were. Now here's the somewhat fun part. We are going to make our own soap mold out of Tupperware that I got from Walmart. This was under $4. It comes with 10 Tupperware containers for food, but we are going to use them for soap. They also have lids, so it worked out perfectly. So you can use parchment paper to pretty much make anything into a soap mold if you don't have, silicone. So here I am just going to use the parchment paper to measure out over the container so I can get the correct size, or as close to the correct size as possible. And then I'm going to fold the parchment paper over the container so I can get rid of any excess parchment paper. And then I'm going to cut the insides of it in an effort to sort of visually estimate where the inside of the parchment paper would be. And so I cut towards the middle of the container, and then I'm just going to fold all those things over. To make this parchment paper as effective as possible, I'm going to take the two longer ends. I'm going to cut the top of them so that they could cross over the container. And then I'm going to take the middle part, because that's going to keep all the soap in there. And I'm going to use a binder clip or tape to pull that side down. For the longer size, I just use tape. And now you have your own handmade soap mold. And now we are ready to make soap. So we are going to start with our protective gear. So we're going to put on our gloves. We're going to put on a mask. We're going to make sure we have on our long sleeves as well as our long pants because we don't want any lye getting on our skin and burning us. Let's get started with prepping our colors. So we are going to be using ultramarine green pigment as well as ultramarine purple pigment and rose clay, which you can get all these items from Walmart. When it comes to temperatures, I like to soap below 120 degrees and usually within 10 degrees of each other. I'll be pre-mixing 2 out of the 3 colors today. So I'm doing a half a teaspoon of purple pigment, a half a teaspoon of green pigment, and then 1 teaspoon of oils just to get the clumps out of the pigments before I pour the soap batter into them. And this is just to avoid specks of color inside the soap after the soap is finished, which doesn't hurt you, but it just doesn't look good to me. It's just a preference for me. So I always pre-mix my colors regardless of whether they're pigments or clays. I mix them prior to starting the soap. So these cups have measurements on the side. So I'm pouring around 200 milliliters per color. I chose to make the main batter rose clay, so I just added in a teaspoon of rose clay, and this is a prime example of why I always pre-mix my colors. Look at all those specks. So unfortunately, I am going to have to take the stick blender so I can blend all those out, and I usually don't want to do that because I don't want to speed up trace because I want to be able to pour a nice fluid pour. But in this case, it still worked out. And since I am making layers, I kind of need a thick trace so that I can properly layer the soap. But I wanted the bottom layer to be as fluid as possible, just so it can be a nice start to my pouring. When pouring these layers, you definitely have to have a spatula on hand because you want to use the spatula to break the fall because you don't want the second layer of soap to go through and end up kind of swirling with the first layer. So you want to wait till you get to a thicker trace, and then you also want to use the silicone spatula to break the fall and keep whatever the color that you have to keep that layer on top. So that is exactly what I'm doing here. Even though we are on day 3, I decided to do some day 5 prep. So for our embeds, I'm just using the remaining layers, the remaining soap batter from these layers to put in these flower shape mold, just so I can put those as embeds on the top. Now you can use melt and pour soap, but I wanted to use cold process soap. So that was the reason why I had to do this ahead of time, so I can make those embeds, let the soap set up, and I let it sit there for 24 hours before I made the day 5 soap. And like I was saying before, melt and pour soap is perfectly fine for doing these embeds. I just chose not to simply because I have a cutter, and melt and pour soap gets a lot harder, a lot quicker than cold process soap. And I didn't want to run the risk of cutting or messing up my wires to my cutter by using the melt and pour soap embeds. And usually, maybe like a day after adding the embeds to the cold process soap, if they were melt and pour embeds, it would be fine to use a cutter. But knowing me, sometimes I take about 2 days before I will cut the soap. So I just wanted to be cautious to make sure I don't mess up my wires. So it's been 24 hours later, and I just love these molds that I made with this parchment paper. It just slides right out there. So I am just going to unmold it. Look at how nice it came out, and then we'll put it on the cutter so you can see the nice layers. The layers are not as straight as I would like them, but hey, this is soap making and it's artisan soap, so it is not going to come out perfect, but it is still going to be artistic and nice. It is not too late to join in this challenge. You can go ahead and check out day 1 and day 2. You can download the challenge packet and then make sure you post your photos on Facebook, or if you have a YouTube, post them on YouTube, and just put the hashtag soap start challenge so I can check them out. I'm really looking forward to seeing everyone's soap bar. And for now, Black Hands are out. See you guys on day 4.